Origin Chance, and this is the F-111's Fatal Flaw by channel Australian Military Aviation. Okay. Due to the F-111 to the Royal Australian Air Force was held up during the General Dynamics could iron out a fatal flaw in the wing pivot design. Okay. So I'm guessing this is like 100 series was... I'm pretty sure they were like 100 and then 101. I guess I'm pretty sure I heard about that in like unsubscribed podcast thing. What is it called, Voodoo or something, right? And there are many planes. So and after that they reset the number, right? I'm pretty sure like F4 and things like that. So this is like 50, 60 type of plane. Yeah, so it's gonna be interesting. What is the name of the plane though? I don't know. It doesn't say it here. But yeah. Right, let's do this one. Remember, if you like my rigs, don't forget to subscribe so that way I know we start videos tomorrow. Check out the rigs and there's a link in the description. And yeah, let's do it.
Particular flaw was fixed. This particular flaw was seen as so dangerous that the Australian...
It is right. Like, look at how cool it looks. Why is that? Is it simplistic? Or is this the jet fighter we imagine when we think of a jet fighter? I don't know. It's like, it looks slick. Right? Look at that.
Australians would wait until 1973 to accept the design. The F-111 had been designed in the early 1960s. At the start of the decade in 1960, a Soviet surface-to-air missile site had shot down a U-2 at over 60,000 feet. To the Americans, this was alarming. It meant that the Soviets had better anti-aircraft systems than the Americans had thought. It also meant that the aging fleet of V-bombers, nuclear bombers designed in the early 1950s, like the Victor and Vulcan, were basically obsolete. In fact, the F-105, which had just been introduced, was already...
Wait a minute. Did all the bombers were called V? Because I'm pretty sure there was Valkyrie that they never finished, right? I'm pretty sure that was the case. Yeah, around this same time, Russia's gonna like send Sputnik and things like that, right? So yeah, their ability to like shoot down a U-2, that makes sense, like space abilities. Around the, then after the Sputnik, America panicked, like holy shit, this is we need to do something for this. This is like they are now accessing space now. That's dangerous. It's not even about bombers anymore. Right, that intercontinental ballistic missile, that's what that was, basically Sputnik. So they can just like throw nuke at US like that, let alone, we don't even have time to think about bombers at that time.
Showing its weaknesses. Tactical Air Command wanted a design that could fly fast and low, below enemy radar, and carry anything from a large payload to a nuclear bomb hundreds of kilometers into enemy territory, and then get out, all without being shot down. For General Dynamics, the request came at the perfect time, because the Navy was also looking for a similar aircraft. They had been worried that the F-4 Phantom would not be able to fulfill the role of Fleet Air Defense, or FAD, and were looking for an aircraft with good speed, good range.
Yeah, F-4 was, I'm pretty sure, was F-110, right? And they basically changed the designation to F-4 with some updates and things, because it was supposed to do some job, but then in like Navy, and they got the F-4. So as far as I remember, I'm pretty sure it was like F-110. I think it was something, there was a name, I forgot the name of that.
And longer-range missile systems. It would need to be an interceptor like the F-4, but with a bomber characteristic, allowing it to carry large amounts of anti-air and anti-ship munitions. The following year, in 1961, everything would fall into place. Both the Navy and Air Force had been reassured by NASA that variable sweep wing designs were now safe, and both branches were asking for something which could act as a bomber, an interceptor, and if need be, even a fighter. Not only that, but the aircraft would need 2 seats, twin engines, and extreme speed. At the insistence of the newly appointed Robert McNamara, a single aircraft should be developed under the Tactical Fighter Experimental, or TFX program. However, things would become challenging. Disagreements between Navy and Air Force heightened as requirements were listed and proposals put forth. All aircraft proposals were deemed unacceptable by the Navy. In fact, most of this stemmed from the fact that the Air Force and Navy did not want their programs to be intertwined. McNamara himself would step in, choosing the General Dynamics design, which shared the most commonalities as a platform between the Air Force and Navy versions. And thus, the F-111 would begin development. It would be part of what was nicknamed the Century Series aircraft, a series of combat aircraft designed to fill various roles. Among them were the iconic combat-tested F-100 Super Sabre and the F-105 Thunder Chief, which would see massive use in Vietnam. Other designs in the series included the F-101 Voodoo, the F-104 Starfighter, and the lesser-known F-102 and F-106. A key feature of the aircraft was the configuration of its wings. Variable geometry wing designs had been avoided, but following intense testing by NASA,
the wing changes shape like that, isn't that at that time risky a bit? How good was that? Because if it worked like that, that's insane. Back then, they were doing this shit. Look at that. It changed shape. I guess at higher speed, it would make a difference, right?
aircraft manufacturers were encouraged in the late 1950s to begin exploring swept-wing designs.
I love that.
The
Look
F-111 would be the
insane.
first production combat aircraft with proper variable sweep wings. While the variable geometry system offered many advantages, it also made the aircraft more complex. More moving parts meant more issues could occur. In the case of the F-111...
See, that's what I mean. In 1960, they were doing this, the moving parts, this complication is much higher, the mechanical failure can be higher because of it, and they still did it. Look at that.
A fatal accident would prove this to be the case. In July 1968, the first test flight of the Charlie model F-111C in Fort Worth, Texas, highlighted the flawed integrity of the wing box. Without proper integrity, the aircraft's wings could detach completely. Other issues were noted in an August 1968 fatigue test, where the aircraft developed several issues traced to poor manufacturing. Then, on the 22nd of December 1969, during a pull-up from a simulated rocket attack run at Nellis Air Force Base, an F-111A suffered catastrophic failure with the left wing detached.
They were doing that in 1960s, man. That's insane just to think of it and doing it, right? It's a stress test and everything, of course, it's going to cause issues. And the material science wasn't that good back then, right, compared to today. Not even today, compared to a few decades past. Material science wasn't that good. Not to mention, NASA is to credit for a lot of technology that will come out of the space program, right? Not just miniaturization of chips and computers, but a lot of things, mechanisms and things. Yeah, things that were tested in Apollo program was way too instrumental. And those things carried over to planes and things like that. This thing probably doesn't have any of them. So trying to do this, this kind of a wing design that changes shape, of course it's going to cause issues, right? Integrity is going to be up to question.
From the aircraft. The experienced crew were unable to eject in the F-111 pod due to how quickly the aircraft began rolling. Both crew were killed in the accident. With only 100 hours clocked on the aircraft should not have had such a catastrophic failure. The issue was traced to the wing pivot, in which a crack had formed due to a sharp-edged forging defect. Some of these aircraft were bound for Australia. Australian crews had been training on earlier version of the aircraft since 1967. However, after this incident, the order was put on hold, and Australia would be leased F-4E Phantoms until the order could be completed. The Australians were rightly cautious. Since its first flight in 1964, the F-111 Alpha had suffered from various issues, both in the US and testing in Vietnam, resulting in the aircraft being sent home. This included an issue in which the tailplane weld joins would fail under fatigue. This resulted in 2 failures in 1968, one in Vietnam and one at Nellis Air Force Base. There was another fatal incident in February 1969, in which the terrain following radar failed after signal was absorbed by snow, resulting in the aircraft flying into a mountain, where it lay undiscovered until June that year.
Damn.
The U.S. Navy F-111 Bravo would also suffer technical issues, with the Navy later scrapping the Bravo model in favor of another aircraft. While the Charlie model was an improvement to the aircraft, there were still major flaws which would need correcting. This 1969 incident was widespread news. It directly resulted in the U.S. Air Force developing a new philosophy for aircraft damage tolerance. What surprised everyone was just how rapidly a small defect led to disaster.
I mean, but
The incident occurred in the 7.
Look, man, its feature of like the wing basically changing shape like that. That is the cause of the issues, and it makes sense. Like that's too ambitious for the 60s, right? So I mean, it kind of makes. But yeah, they decide to do that in the first place. It's like takes balls, right? So yeah.
0.26 millimeter lower plate of the wing pivot fitting, WPF. A manufacturing flaw at 5.72 millimeters deep in the plate began to grow during the flight. A crack grew to 23.6 millimeters across the plate and 6.16 millimeters deep, enough to become a critical failure. The wing pivot fitting broke, which led to a chain of events in which the entire left wing flew off the aircraft. Testing was undertaken over the following year. Similar issues would occur: a component fatigue failure in an Echo model in 1970 and a catastrophic failure of an Alpha model in 1971. The process of manufacturing was slowly improved, and ultra-high-strength D6AC steel was heat-treated to improve tensile strength. D6AC, a medium-carbon low-alloy steel, was chosen over aluminium alloys, since aluminium at the time didn't possess the same strength-to-weight ratio. However, since the majority of failures traced back to the manufacture of steel components, it was believed that the heat treatment process had been inconsistent, resulting in variations of the fracture toughness of the steel. A low fracture toughness meant that even the small...
Yeah, like I said, material science wasn't as good. So like small variations like this can happen because of machines and things. Like they weren't as good as today. I mean, flaws like that happening today would be rare because of all like seamless and like the way machines are made, right? Material science is much better today.
Smallest inconsistency could result in a catastrophic crack or failure. On the 15th of March 1973, the first redesigned F-111C was accepted by the RAAF at Nellis Air Force Base after a long process known as the Recovery Program. Following this, the first 6 aircraft would arrive at Amberley on July 1, 1973. With the fatal problem now resolved, the F-111 would enter service and prove to be extremely valuable in the Australian inventory. It had a longer range and a faster top speed than any other aircraft being operated in Southeast Asia, giving Australia an edge in defense. Not only that, but despite its early teething problems, the F-111 would end up establishing the best safety record of any of the Century Series fighters, with only 77 losses after 1 million flying hours. The F-111C would continue to serve until 2010, making the RAAF the last operators of this iconic aircraft.
Yeah, what doesn't make sense to me? Like, why didn't they do? And I'm pretty sure, like, what are the other planes after this? Like, there are F-15, F-16, and F-18. None of them has this wing-changing thing. So why did they stop making that? Right? This feels like something that would come today. Like, oh, look at the 21st century technology. We can, like, this will increase aerodynamics and everything. We can change wings, this and that. But yeah, nobody did this after F-111. Why is that? Right? I'm pretty sure. Which is the other plane? I can't remember other plane that does that. But yeah. So this is the plane that they add into the, Voyager and things like that. So this was a legendary plane. Is that it? So after all these flaws, they, took out all the kinks and things and ironed it out, and now the plane was good. Man, I didn't know about F-111 like that, right? I don't know of, what is it, F-117, right? Nighthawk, the stealth plane and things. But when it comes to Century series, I don't know much about it. So yeah, this is a surprise. People don't talk about these planes that much. Alright, well, if you like, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.